Hi, so today I have my sociology exam, but that's not the point. I'm making this video so I can do an essay read through so I can attempt to consolidate this knowledge for my development exam on Monday, which is the last one. I've only got 10 minutes of recording, so I've got to be relatively quick. So, right. The question is, theological pluralism does not undermine Christian beliefs. Okay. Theological pluralism is the belief that no faith possesses the whole truth. This stance recognizes the mystery of God and that he exists outside of human understanding. Therefore, God cannot be captured entirely with the literal language of Scripture or verbal semantics of preachers and missionaries. Theologians, a missionary, by the way, is someone who preaches the Scriptures and they try to get people to convert to their faith. Theologians who hold this perspective include John Hick and Raymond Paniker, both of whom are Christians and perceive no issues with holding a pluralist standpoint. This supports the idea that theological pluralism does not undermine Christian belief. However, this isn't necessarily the consensus within the Christian faith, and Hick's ideas are seen to be rather controversial. Wittgenstein, 20th century philosopher, claimed religion to be a family resemblance. This means faiths share common characteristics such as prayer, rules, scriptures, and some form of deity, but there are fundamental differences in the details. For example, Christians believe God had a son, Jesus, whereas Muslims do not. We could argue that large contradictions between scriptures and beliefs means that one or both faiths must be false because it's impossible for God to both have and not have a son. If we take the literal interpretation of Scripture, then yes, this is the case. However, Hick argues that all religious language is symbolic and points towards one ultimate God he calls the real, and this is very similar to Paul Tillich's idea on symbolism as well. Hick was originally a Christian missionary, someone who preaches scriptures and attempts to convert people, until he started working at Birmingham University. He noticed members of different faith groups acting in a godly way, a way in which he identified to be fundamentally Christian. He realised that not all faiths can be literally true, but didn't feel comfortable maintaining a fundamentalist Christian standpoint because he thought this would undermine God's benevolence. He asked, would a Christian God of love really deny such people salvation? It makes sense to hold this perspective because not everybody has been exposed to Jesus or the Christian faith. So how is this fair to take an exclusivist standpoint whereby people can only be saved if they accept Jesus? In a way, this does undermine the Christian faith because most Christians are inclusivist or exclusivist and believe Christianity is the only fully true faith. But this does seem to undermine God's benevolence. If all faiths take an exclusivist perspective, then this poses massive problems when we compare and contrast the faiths. Logically, they can't all be literally true, so exclusivism leads to division, whereas pluralism leads to unity. But this does require the sacrifice of literal interpretation, which for some will undermine the Christian faith. Hick was influenced by Kant. Hick was influenced by Kant in his thinking on God. Kant believed God exists in the noumenal, but our experience is phenomenological, meaning we can't know for certain exactly what God is. William Cantwell Smith said we cannot know the transcendent. If this is the case, then all religions are just an attempt at understanding God, and none are completely true, or at least we cannot be certain which ones are completely or partly true, because we cannot experience or know the noumenal. We can support the pluralist standpoint by looking at the universal nature of religious experience. William James identified common characteristics between religious experiences, and these did not change based on the different faiths. This suggests that all faiths are just a phenomenological attempt to understand the same spiritual reality, or the real as Hick called it. This doesn't seem to undermine the Christian faith per se, but it recognises the limits of our understanding and that we can't know God. Therefore, to take a religious missionary standpoint is illogical because it requires conviction and belief. Hicks said we need to undergo a Copernican revolution. Copernicus realised that it is not the sun which revolves around the earth, as was previously thought, but that the earth, along with all the other planets, revolves around the sun. The sun is God, or the noumenal, and the planets are all of the different faiths attempting to understand the same God. So again, we come back to this idea that pluralism doesn't undermine the Christian faith, but recognises the illegitimacy of human understanding in form of scripture and teaching. If we are all made imago Dei, or in the image of God, God would... What the hell does that say? And want to perceive this as literally true, then we can't reject other faiths as false or just possessing rays of truth, as the Roman Catholic Church says, because it doesn't make sense for an omnibenevolent being to create a world whereby only some have the ability to be saved and others who have never been exposed to Christ or Christian teachings will be damned. Pluralism poses problems to Christianity. However, because pluralism poses problems to Christianity, because they are not willing to accept their faith as just mythological or symbolic. They believe it is literally true. This is why Hicks' perspective is controversial. However, we can support the idea of faith as mythological or symbolic by looking at the work of Carl Jung. He talked of the collective unconscious. He noticed similarities in the narratives of different worldly myths, but it is just the way in which the mythological or archetypal narratives is expressed which changes, and this can be attributed to cultural differences. A common theme he noticed was the descent into chaos in order to transform. He said chaos leads to transformation. We can see this in Christianity with Jesus dying on the cross, which is chaos, then being resurrected, which is transformation. This is the sort of view that Hick takes and is also shared by Paul Tillich. So it's not that this literally happens in the eyes of a pluralist, but that it is symbolic and representative of life in an archetypal way. Exclusivists such as Da Costa would reject this because it reduces the literal truth of Christianity to a myth, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is arbitrary or lacks truth. It is just perceived this way to fundamentalists. Overall, pluralism does not undermine Christian beliefs objectively. It is just a way of looking at the world and understanding that we can't understand God from our phenomenological perspectives. It takes into account the differences between faiths and that they are all just different ways of reaching the same ultimate spiritual reality. Perhaps it would make more sense to say that exclusivism undermines Christianity because a loving God would not condemn other worldly faiths to eternal suffering. Okay, so that's the essay I did. I've got a minute and a half left. I got an A grade on it. I don't know, I've been trying to learn theological pluralism for a bit, and I've still got to get more to grips with exclusivism and inclusivism, which I'm going to do over the weekend in preparation for Monday. And I'm also going to have to go over all of my other developments content as well, because that just feels necessary. Probably going to have to cut this out. I've got a little bit of time. I had my sociology exam today, and I thought I was really worried about it all day. I thought it was going to go really badly, and it might have still gone bad, but I enjoyed writing it. I think I wrote a decent 30 marker. I think I wrote relevant answers to the questions, and I think I included enough detail. So I'm just hoping that on results day that I don't get disappointed. I'm not getting my hopes up too much. I think it's gone okay, but I just don't want to completely. I don't know for certain. So yeah. And I'm just hoping that Monday's developments exam goes okay. Because so far in philosophy, I feel like that's gone okay. Philosophy and ethics. So yeah, and that's my last exam on Monday, so I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, that's an example of a pluralism essay. So yeah, that's all I want to talk about in this video. I could probably sit and talk for a bit longer, but I don't have enough time on recording. So yeah, okay, thanks for watching.